Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, the Virtualized Friendly Confines OpenShift Virtualization. Before I go ahead and pass it over to our speaker, I wanted to take a quick minute to go over what we do here at Fierce Software. Fierce Software is a small, women-owned, value-added reseller. We specialize in enterprise open source software, market-leading DevOps capabilities, and secure data platforms for our public sector customers. Our unique reseller perspective helps us understand your goals and technology challenges, allowing us to offer solutions from our extensive portfolio instead of just a single vendor approach. We set ourselves apart in the reseller market by consistently delivering on our core capabilities. We are an innovation broker to leading technologies, getting our customers access to the smartest people and the best technology available. We are a licensed manager, streamlining customer fulfillment and reducing administrative burdens. Our focus is on customer success, ensuring technical support through vendor-trained and certified professional services. We also provide customer enablement by delivering workshops, webinars, and hands-on events to educate our customers about new features and enhance their team's capabilities. At Fierce Software, we keep very close partnerships with our vendors and represent a portfolio of capabilities. This allows us to meet our customers where they are, hear their challenges, and work with them to find complete solutions to their problems. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. Wes is a solutions architect at Red Hat who covers all things related to Red Hat training and certification. He holds various Red Hat certifications in Linux, containers, and Kubernetes, and particularly enjoys discussing customer challenges in application architecture and API design. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. If you have any questions during this webinar, go ahead and leave them in the chat and we'll answer them at the end. You can go ahead and get things started, Wes.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jody. I appreciate the introduction. Hey, everyone. As Jody mentioned, my name is Wes. I'm a solution architect in our North America training and certification team here at Red Hat. So it's a pleasure to be with you all here today to talk about a really hot topic, virtualization, which is fun. Real quick, I'm just going to make sure I get all settled, get my screen shared, get the Q&A window and the chat window pulled up here. Grab the Q&A window. Cool. Just to make sure I've got it. Love interactivity. We'll get to that in just a second. 1 second here. Sorry about that. I couldn't find the mute button. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So brief agenda of what we're going to cover. We'll level set on why we're here, what we plan on really covering today, what we plan on getting into. We'll contextualize the current moment a bit. So talk about what's going on in the landscape of virtualization. Why is everybody really focused in on OpenShift virtualization within the Red Hat stack right now? What's going on in the industry? And then we'll dive deep into OpenShift virtualization as a product, right? What it can do, technically speaking, what it is, and then kind of talk a little bit more high level about it too, and how it can solve some business challenges. And then, as always, bridging the gap with Red Hat training. I'm here on behalf of the Red Hat training and certification team, so I've got to talk training. We might have time for a brief demo of OpenShift virtualization using our Red Hat Learning subscription kind of as the vehicle to do that later in the session today. Will depend on time, so we'll see if we get to that at the end here. We'll wrap and review, of course, and then Q&A as always. But what I will say is I did spend some time to make sure I've got the chat and the Q&A window open on my second monitor here. So, as you have questions or as you want to throw something in the chat, please feel free to do so. And I will do my best to sort of answer those as I go where it makes sense. If I don't get to a question you have throughout the conversation, I will do my best to leave some time at the end to make sure we get to any kind of unanswered questions. So I got them both open, whichever one is fine with me. Interactivity is great. So if you got any questions or if you at any point can't hear me or can't see me or my screen seems to stop moving, let me know that as well. But as we go, let's go ahead and get started. So why are we here? So what we're going to do is a few different things. You're probably hearing a lot about virtualization, especially if you're in this webinar. It's become a hot topic. So let's talk about why. Why is it top of mind for so many folks in their IT space right now? Why is it kind of coming back around? I think everyone was thinking about, containers and containerization of microservices and modernization, quote unquote. So why the sudden spike in virtualization? We'll talk about that a little bit. And then we'll explain where Red Hat fits into the overall landscape within virtualization. So we'll show in context where OpenShift Virtualization fits in, and we'll talk about it as a product and really kind of dive deep into what makes it tick. And then we'll demonstrate how Red Hat training can bridge the gap. So we'll talk about Red Hat training and kind of the options for approaching upskilling on OpenShift Virtualization with Red Hat and Fierce. But then we'll also hopefully get into a demonstration of the tool using an exercise from one of our classes in the Red Hat Learning subscription. So, a lot to cover here today. Really excited to do so. So, without further ado, let's contextualize this current moment. So, modernization, containerizations, DevOps, SRE, those were the buzzwords for so long, and now we're back to virtualization. Why are we back to virtualization? So, I don't know if you've heard, but there's a lot that's been going on in this space over the last few years. On the left here, you see the Red Hat virtualization lifecycle. The plan to sort of retire that product, Red Hat virtualization, and sort of move into the OpenShift virtualization space as our virtualization tool of choice. Red Hat virtualization was based on Overt, still a beloved tool by many and many of my colleagues as well that loved that tool. We still have a course actually on our website that teaches that tool set, but it's certainly not getting the support or kind of the push anymore. It's something we're trying to move on from in terms of modernization. So that was one thing that happened. And then, of course, I don't know if you heard, but Broadcom bought VMware, and things have been changing there, and the market's been a little bit unsettled to say the least. There's a lot going on, and it's an ever-evolving landscape. It's moving very quickly. Things change all the time, but everyone at the very least is evaluating their virtualization footprint, whether they're moving, whether they're migrating, whether they're changing. Everyone's at least looking at it and seeing what makes sense, given the landscape of the news over the last, 12, 18, 24 months. And that's important, right? These are big catalyst events, things that change, things that kind of make us look at the market and say, wow, we need to see what we need to do here in terms of our virtualization footprint. What do we want to do with it? Do we want to modernize it? Do we want to push to containers? Do we want to just migrate it? Just want to keep it where it is? Lots of decisions to be made, and we at Red Hat are here to help you kind of navigate those questions and sort of make those decisions in the most informed way that you can with your business. So first and foremost, virtualization's not going away. I think anytime we're in IT and we have a moment that pops where something is a really big deal for a little while, everyone just assumes we're going to move on entirely from the previous thing and we're going to dive headlong into the new thing. So for a while it was cloud, right? The industry said everything needs to be on cloud. We need to have nothing on premise, no data centers, everything's in the cloud. Well, now the swing back is everyone saying, oh, hybrid makes a lot more sense, for a lot of reasons, making sure we keep some workloads on premise, making sure we keep some workloads in the cloud, maybe a distributed footprint. It's sort of a middle ground, right? And Red Hat has always sort of taken that position of, hybrid makes sense. Never overcommit yourself one way or the other. Make sure your workloads can run wherever makes the most sense to you because different workloads have different needs. And the same is true for containers and virtualization, right? I think a lot of folks thought, oh, virtualization, virtual machines, this is the new thing. Everything needs to be in a VM. And then containers came around and it was, oh, everything needs to be a microservice. Everything needs to be a container. And I think a lot of that enthusiasm kind of gets tempered over time as we realize, one, virtual machines are pretty well enmeshed and pretty well ingrained into a lot of technical stacks. Yes, the promise of virtual machines is transportability, interoperability, and kind of flexibility. But realistically, a lot of folks really ingrain a lot of those virtual machines into their stack to where they get really hard to move, right? You're connecting them and interfacing them with other tools and applications. You've got a lot of stuff stored in there. You've updated them or you haven't updated them. You've kind of let them languish. And so, you can't necessarily move them. And they kind of are where they are and are what they are. And that's okay in some cases, right? In some cases, if something just works, and you have no real need to modernize, you're not really hurting yourself in any way, then why change something that's still working that you really support really well? And to that end, right, virtualization isn't going anywhere. And this sort of graph shows that depiction of, the move to containers is a real thing. It does exist, and there's some projecting out there as well. But who knows whether this will slow down, whether this will speed up, or whether it will level off at a certain point, right? And there's a quote down there from Gartner that reckons all about, the default choice for new applications might be containers for a lot of workloads, but that doesn't mean all legacy applications are going to move, right? So we have to contend with this idea that virtual machines are here to stay for a very long time. And so we need to manage them. We need to make sure they're kept along in a way that supports both a modernization strategy for a company, but also supports the ongoing business and continuation of business for any applications that you've got running, any workloads you've got running in virtual machines. You got to be able to do both, right? You got to have your feet in a bit of both worlds, and you need to do it strategically and you need to do it smartly. So we are hearing a lot of narratives here, and we're hearing from a lot of different customers about a lot of different perspectives. And I think we hear two different approaches here. One is I want to modernize, right? I want to kind of really approach this as a catalyst for modernizing my application footprint. I want to take things that are sitting, maybe running on bare metal even, or sitting running in virtual machines, and I want to talk about the effort to containerize them and move them onto a platform like OpenShift. Well, we can certainly help you with that. We can certainly help you kind of determine your footprint, determine what a modernization effort would look like, and then talk about lifting it and moving it over into OpenShift or into a Kubernetes platform. The other thing we're hearing is I want to migrate, right? I need a new landing place. I need a safe harbor. I don't want to modernize. Don't scare me with containers. Don't scare me with Kubernetes. But can you give me a virtualization platform where I can land safely and continue my operations? And we can do that too with OpenShift virtualization, right? So there are a lot of different options here. And there's a lot in between as well, where certain workloads may fit into one bucket versus another one. So we want to be there for our customers with our partners to kind of support whatever strategic decisions you're looking to make as a business. So in enter the friendly confines of OpenShift virtualization. Let's talk about what it is for a second. And I like analogies a lot. If you ever kind of listened to my presentations before, you'll know I do my best to use an analogy where I can. So let's talk about a smart TV for a second. I think most people these days are familiar with a smart TV. You might have just like a TV that runs a smart TV OS, that whether it's Roku, whether it's your Samsung, whether it's your Viva TV, whatever it might be, could be an Apple TV. You've got options in terms of streaming on your TV. And when you open your TV, you get all these tiles where it's like, hey, you can go to the Netflix app, or you can go to the HDMI port, or you can even go to the AV port. And you'll notice here on this TV, right, we've got HDMI 1 and HDMI 2, and then we've got different apps. We've got a little DVD player connected down here. So if we've got this smart TV, what we need to remember is the core function of it is it's still a TV. You still have all of the abilities to use this television as a non-internet connected television. You can still hook up a DVD player. You can still hook up a cable box. You can still hook up a satellite if you want to, and you can just use this as a display effectively. You can do all of this stuff without ever really touching the rest. You don't have to stream on Netflix. You don't have to move your cable subscription to a streaming service like YouTube TV if you don't want to, right? You can just use the smart TV as a TV, and that's okay. You can keep your DVD player if you want to. You can keep your VHS player if you want to, for most cases in most smart TVs. Now, some may not be built anymore with certain ports. I get that. But most of them, if you look on the back, will still have that tri-colored port option, believe it or not. I actually hooked up an old gaming system the other day and was really shocked to see that I could still use a Wii on one of my modern smart TVs. So it still works, believe it or not, right? And that's sort of the mentality we're taking here. You've got options. You can use all the advanced features and streaming, and you can drop your cable subscription if you really want to, and you can use a smart TV to kind of springboard this, or you can just use the smart TV as a TV and hook up your DVD player and be really happy about it. Both are fine, right? Equal or great. The TV can do both. It's happy to do both. Let's talk about OpenShift virtualization and OpenShift as it relates to this. So if you think of the OpenShift container platform as that television, right? We want to give you the ability to do both within OpenShift. If you want to run modernized, containerized applications and microservices, you can do that in OpenShift. That's like your streaming. That's like saying, I want to use Netflix, I want to use YouTube TV, I want to cut the cord, I don't want a cable box, don't want a DVD player, I want to lean all the way into a streaming approach. But if you want to keep that DVD player and you want to keep that cable subscription and you just want to click into that HDMI option and just live in your happy place, you can do that too. You'll notice these virtual machines running alongside these container workloads. That's kind of what OpenShift virtualization is meant to do, right? You're in that OpenShift virtualization sphere, so to speak. You don't really have to worry about everything else happening around it. You just have to worry about the virtual machines that are running there within OpenShift virtualization, just like you only have to worry about clicking into the HDMI kind of one tile so that you wake up your DVD player or wake up your cable box. Same idea, right? If you want to keep your VMs, you can. We're there to help you run it, and that's what OpenShift virtualization is designed to do. You can also just do both at once. And the cool part here is with a smart TV, you might have a family in the house, and some people might want to be streaming on Netflix or on Hulu, and other people might want to use it for just the cable box that's running. That's all good, right? You can do both of these things and be happy and be using the same TV. OpenShift is that exact same way, with OpenShift being there to run the container workloads for anyone that wants to run those modernized apps and pipelines, and for anyone that wants to run virtual machines, that's there for you. You're hooked up to that cable box and you just click the button and you go to your spot and you manage your cable box and you know exactly how it works. It's great, right? One TV to rule them all. It's kind of the idea with OpenShift virtualization. So again, please feel free to post questions in the Q&A or in the chat. I've got both of those up right now, and I'm really happy to take any questions or any thoughts kind of as they come up. So not seeing anything right now, which is okay. But just keep in mind if you have questions or thoughts or just additions or anything, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'm happy to look at that. So I'll do my best to kind of keep an eye on that every slide or so. But let's get a little more technical here. That was a good sort of high level approach, but what about kind of the actual technicalities here? So let's get a little more in the weeds, right? You see on the right this diagram, which I think is a really good representation of what I just said, where you've got OpenShift Container Platform, which runs on a foundation of Red Hat Enterprise Linux Core OS, which is really just RHEL. That's another conversation. That's another webinar. On top of could be a physical machine in this case, could be a virtualized machine. However you want to run your OpenShift deployment, right? Could be on cloud, whatever it needs to be. But you can run VMs and containers both in OpenShift with the OpenShift virtualization operator. So OpenShift virtualization is an included feature in OpenShift. It's an operator. For those of you that might not know what an operator is, think of it like another package you can install or like a plugin where you can install a thing to kind of do a certain function. So virtualization is an operator. It's a big one, but it's an operator. Think of other plugins that might be an operator, like if you're an Argo CD person or a Tecton person, OpenShift pipelines, OpenShift GitOps, those things are operators as well. So there's a variety of different operators in the space. So it does run VMs in OpenShift, and we'll get a little bit more in the weeds on how that works in just a second. And it kind of comes with all of that good stuff that you'd be really excited about as it relates to running it in OpenShift, right? That supportability, that scalability, that stability. You get those inherent features because at the end of the day, you're running it on OpenShift. So you get all of those sort of advanced features if you choose to use them. The RHEL guest entitlements are included. That's a really cool function that's happening right now. I don't know what the time horizon is on that, but if you want to run OpenShift virtualization and you want to run RHEL VMs in OpenShift virtualization, you can do that. I'm pretty sure in a lot of cases it's free of charge, especially if you're moving from a different provider. But check with your account team and your Fierce account team and your Red Hat point of contact to make sure and verify that. But I'm pretty sure that's still accurate at this point. And yeah, you've got a unified platform for running virtual machines and containers here. To get a little bit more technical, kind of in the weeds, containers are not the same as virtual machines, right? I think that's just worth putting out there in the open. We're not saying that you're running a container and you're running a virtual machine and they're exactly the same thing and there's no problems. No, they are different. And you see that in the diagram here on the right, where you've still got the infrastructure. And then for the virtual machine, you've got the hypervisor and then the guest OS and then the app on top. Versus with containerization, you've got the infrastructure, the operating system, and then the various apps all running in containers. So it is a slightly different abstraction, but they're still similar, right? And in terms of some of the structure you're seeing here, and we could still make it work together in a way. And we'll talk about how in just a second. But just a reminder, they are different, right? The containers over there are isolated. They're working by themselves versus, there's no hypervisor needed in this case. And the container contains just the binaries, just the libraries, just the dependencies it needs to run that application. It's very narrow versus a VM can be much more heavyweight, right? Containers are also meant to kind of go away. They're meant to be ephemeral, meant to be temporary and spin up and spin down. VMs a little bit less so. But what we can do is put virtual machines in a container, right? If you're scared, don't be scared. Don't log off. It's okay. It's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. Don't worry. You don't have to understand everything about containers and pods and all that good stuff to really understand how a virtual machine is running on OpenShift virtualization. This is just some background. So if you're somebody who says, I don't want to deal with containers, I just want to run my VMs, hang with me. We're going to get there in just a second. But just for some technical understanding here, just for some really kind of full disclosure elements, right? We're running KVM within, as a process within a container that is a virtual machine, right? So ultimately, we're putting a VM into a container, and we're doing it on OpenShift virtualization, right? So you're running containers managed as pods using that KVM hypervisor. So kernel virtualization management as a hypervisor there. It's all scheduled, deployed, and managed by Kubernetes at the end of the day. Kubernetes, for those that may not be as familiar, that are sort of here just on the virtualization behalf, Kubernetes is the engine under the hood of OpenShift. It's a container orchestration engine. It's got some really cool stuff in it that helps you scale your applications and help sort of manage those workloads. A webinar for another day, but certainly something important. But you get a lot of those benefits that you get with Kubernetes, then you're running those containers and those applications. You get a lot of those same benefits when you're choosing to run virtual machines instead. And then, yeah, integrated with the container resources as well, absolutely. And you kind of the benefits of both worlds, so to speak. So again, OpenShift virtualization is using KVM. So you see a lovely diagram here on the side where you've got kind of, both of these things running together in harmony. So you've got a couple of different things here. You've got CoreOS running, and you've got OpenShift here. So you've got KVM running with the libvirt here and a bunch of virtual machines, and you've got other apps running in containers, and they're all running in one big happy family. So it's good stuff there. We're almost through the technical slides, I promise. So what is OpenShift virtualization? Again, virtual machines in a container world, right? So you've got them both now running. We've kind of abstracted this some, and we've really, pulled the diagram out into many pieces. This is the diagram kind of recollapsed again, right? Saying, hey, let's make it simple. You've got OpenShift, you've got a VM pod, you've got an app pod in a container. They're running next to each other. One's running an OpenShift virtualization, one's running an OpenShift. You can do either one. You don't have to do both. You can, but you don't have to. And we make it really easy. We make it really turnkey, and we make it really user friendly. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes here as well. So moving along, the cool part about Kubernetes is everything is a YAML file, not everything, but a lot of stuff is a resource in a YAML file. And so in this case, you can do defining virtual machines and templates and different resources and different aspects of that virtual machine via YAML, which I know some people love YAML, some people hate it. It's your own sort of choice there, but it's at the very least very easy to read, which is really, really nice. And it's very easy to understand. It's easy to sort of follow along with the indentation. So and it's also consistent with the way we do everything else in Kubernetes and OpenShift and within container workloads there too. So pretty cool stuff. The other thing to consider is migration, and we're going to talk more about this too as we go. We have what we call our migration toolkit for virtualization, which allows for VM migration at scale. So, if you need to migrate your virtual machines over from your source host, be that, VMware, be it some other virtualization tool, wherever it might be, we've got a migration toolkit that'll help you with that, right? So it helps you make a migration plan where you think, hey, like these are how I want to do it. I want to do it live, or I don't want to do it live. Here's the source. This is the storage mapping. This is the network mapping. And then you get to review it. So you get to ensure everything is all tick and tied before you actually hit the go button on any kind of migration. So we kind of walk you through the steps you need to make sure you're taking to have a successful migration into OpenShift virtualization by using this toolkit. And it's very user friendly. And our course that we're going to talk about has training on this as well. And you can kind of get kind of experience with it in the OpenShift virtualization class too. So we're not hanging you out to dry in any way. We're here to help you migrate. We're there to be a safe harbor, so to speak, for your virtual machines that need it. So, this migration toolkit for virtualization in the MTV here is just another example of how we can do that and do it at scale, do it quickly, do it safely, all that good stuff. The other thing to sort of think about here that is worth mentioning. Every Red Hat tool or product is open source, and it's based on a community open source tool of a variety thereof, right? So OpenShift is based at its core on Kubernetes, but there's a lot of other open source tools or community tools that are kind of work together with OpenShift to make a more curated container orchestration platform, right? So you're not just looking at only Kubernetes, you're looking at Kubernetes, you're looking at Argo CD, you're looking at Tecton, you're looking at Cryo, you're looking at all kinds of different stuff. Prometheus that's there to sort of help you, that we test, we QA, we make sure it integrates, and we sort of stand by from an enterprise point of view and say we support this suite of tools together as OpenShift for container orchestration. Same idea with OpenShift virtualization. It's based on KubeVirt, which is a really cool project. There's 200 plus contributing companies, 60 releases. It's one of the top 10 container native Cloud Foundation active projects. I think I got our Cloud Native Container Foundation projects. I can't remember the acronyms. I get too many acronyms in my day to day. And a 50% increase in contributing companies in CY23. It's growing a lot and it's ready for prime time, right? It's mature. there's a lot of, tools that, over time you're kind of waiting to make sure that they're ready for prime time, make sure that they've gone through the testing, they've gone through their vetting. But KubeVirt is real. It's supported. It's something that we contribute to pretty heavily as Red Hat as well, as a tool for virtualizing machines on Kubernetes or on OpenShift in this case. So it's real. It's here, and there's a lot of links there. If you want to go find out and you want to go get hands-on keys with it, just give it a Google and you'll be able to find KubeVirt. It's a pretty cool project. So it's there, and it's what OpenShift virtualization is based off of. It's also in action in the world, whether you know it or not. So NVIDIA supports and contributes to the KubeVirt project. And one of the largest gaming engines that runs 28 million plus users that might have a logo that's there also uses KubeVirt pretty heavily in their deployment. So 28 million users, 1,500 plus games, 100 plus countries, 30 plus data centers. It's huge, right? And I think this is just showing that this technology is ready to operate at scale. It's not experimental, right? It's always growing. Technology is always evolving. It's always changing. It's always, building, iterating, and getting better. But it's ready to run right now. It's ready to help right now. It's ready to step in and run virtualized workloads right now, which is really, really cool. Is really, really exciting that we're here in this space with KubeVirt. And I should say OpenShift virtualization by association. And I can do that with a couple of customer highlights here. So a good reference here is SiriusXM, right? They used OpenShift virtualization, and they said here in this pull quote from their associate director of the Unix systems group at SiriusXM, Nate Mason. I'll just read the quote. Migration was the easiest part. Once you have MTV, which is the migration toolkit for virtualization, speaking to an API, it brings the machines quickly with little to no downtime. It's the right tool for the job. Once we have the network set up and everything placed where it needs to be, the VM goes exactly where you need it to go and starts working immediately. As far as migration goes, it's a great tool. And that's speaking on behalf of what I mentioned before on that migration toolkit for virtualization, which I think is a pretty big concern or consideration for a lot of folks that are evaluating different options for virtualized workloads is we got to move a lot of stuff. How do we do this seamlessly, quickly, safely, easily? All of those illy words where you're thinking, hey, I want to make sure that this works seamlessly. And the migration toolkit for virtualization is there to help you out with that. It's there to make that a more seamless process for you. And so in this case, the goal was to consolidate multiple virtual platforms to eventually be self-service. And OpenShift was a key part of that modernization project, OpenShift in total, not just OpenShift virtualization. But they did use the migration toolkit for virtualization, and they were easy to do, running a VM and a container side by side. And they said it's quote unquote heaven, which is cool. And they also utilize Ansible for other stuff too, which is neat, but not part of this webinar here today. So it's ready for prime time. It works great. We've got customer testimonials, but don't just take it from one customer, take it from a few more. We've got a few up here that basically just chose OpenShift as their tool because of the flexibility it offers with OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization. And it enabled a variety of different customers that we have to kind of have a more modernized architecture without necessarily having to modernize all of their applications, right? So Lockheed is a good example. OpenShift virtualization has enabled us to move our virtualized workloads into containers, giving us the ability to continue to support these workloads from a single management plane with Red Hat OpenShift, which is really, really cool. Cool. Got a question here coming in, so happy to see questions. So just so I understand what's going on, KubeVirt is a container loaded in via Podman, assume Podman, which runs a virtualization engine or QEMM or similar. Kind of there. It's a great question. So KubeVirt is not necessarily a container itself, right? KubeVirt is an operator, which is called OpenShift Virtualization, which is like a package of tools that is installed on top of OpenShift, on top of Kubernetes. It's like a resource, I guess you could say, or it's operator, it's its own class of resource within OpenShift. And it's kind of the tool that runs these virtual machines that are running in containers in pods. So you're pretty close there. It's not using Podman. OpenShift itself doesn't use Podman. Podman's the command line utility you can use kind of for onesie twosie operations. OpenShift and Kubernetes is much more kind of operating with the OC command, and you're kind of interacting. But in this case, what you're using is like an OpenShift virtualization tool, and you can kind of interact from the command line that way with a virtual machine. But the virtual machine itself is running in containers in pods on top of OpenShift within OpenShift virtualization. But you're not really, as a user, seeing that. And I'm going to show you an example here in a little bit. It looks like we are going to have time for the demo, and you'll kind of see what that looks like. Yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah, glad I could answer your question. So it's really cool stuff. We'll take a look at it in just a minute. Cool. So speaking of which, that's a great segue into bridging the gap with Red Hat training. So we're actually going to have time to go through the demo, which is really exciting. So let's talk about Red Hat training real quick, and what we have to offer and sort of our philosophy behind training. So we want to meet you where you are in terms of learning. If you're more of a person that wants to learn on their own, self-paced, we want to meet you there. If you want to take it with an instructor in a classroom, we want to meet you there too. So our live options with an instructor, you got a couple of different things to choose from. One is public delivery on a set schedule, meaning if you just want to go sign up for a class, any of the classes we're about to talk about here, and you want to take it with an instructor and you want to take it with whoever else signs up from wherever they are in the world, you can absolutely do that. It's on a set schedule. It's online on training.redhat.com right now. If you want to take it just with a group of folks from your office or your team or within your organization, you can do that as well, with a private delivery, right? So if we want to engage an instructor with Red Hat to, come to you and actually run a class just for you all, be it online or be it in a training center or be it in person on one of your sites, we can do that as well. Or if you're more a self-paced learner, we can accommodate that too, right? So self-paced, you can kind of buy one class at a time, self-paced, or you can do it with our learning subscription, which is 1 year unlimited access to all of the training that we have to offer. All of our training is, 50% roughly lecture, or in the case of self-paced, a book or videos, which the videos, by the way, on our self-paced tool are recorded in a studio for the self-paced audience. They're not sort of just a recording from grainy video in the back of a classroom. They're studio quality there for you, meant to be very clear. And the material you're covering is exactly the same as you would get in a live class. So that 50% of that, and then 50% hands-on keys in the lab environment that we host. We really do believe that doing is learning. So we want you to kind of get your hands dirty, so to speak, and get in a lab environment and go break some things in a safe place, in a safe way, and go check out some of the technology in that way. So it's kind of goes back and forth between lecture and sort of hands-on keys the entire time. And what we're going to do in a minute is do a demo of one of the guided exercises that comes from one of our courses. So the other option that blends the best of both worlds is something we call our RHLS premium tier. RHLS, once again, being our learning subscription. And we have different options there, but if you get the top of the top tier of our learning subscription, you get the best of both worlds. You get all that self-paced stuff we just talked about, but you also get the option to take instructor-led classes live in half-day increments. That's exclusive just to signing up for members of our premium subscription. So you'll see a calendar and say, hey, we're running our OpenShift virtualization class, and we're doing it in a couple of weeks, and we're doing it over the course of 2 weeks, and maybe you're interested and just learning something from a chapter and you want to see what day that chapter is being taught, you can go sign up for that and take it with an instructor in a 3-hour increment, ask the questions you want to ask, and then move on. So you can kind of do the best of both worlds there, combine self-paced with live instruction as you want to on your time in kind of your own way. So be the master of your own world in that way. 1 second here, folks. Sorry, I had to clear my throat there. I know you guys could probably all tell I was getting emotional about OpenShift. Okay, so let's talk about our training. So there's a couple of different ways to approach learning about OpenShift virtualization. For folks that want to learn how to use OpenShift virtualization and want to migrate their VMs and want to run those safely and kind of think about modernization and containers later down the line, we can meet you there. So if you want to learn that, I would recommend taking our Managing Virtual Machines with OpenShift Virtualization course, which is that DO 316 you see here at the top, with the optional exam, should you want to get certified, associated with it. The cool part about this class is don't let the 3 in the number kind of confuse you and make you think that it's an advanced class. It's not. It's a very approachable course. You don't have to be an OpenShift expert. You don't have to be a Kubernetes expert. You don't have to know what a container is in order to walk in and take this class and learn about OpenShift virtualization. We give you a little bit intro. We kind of explain, hey, like this is what Kubernetes is, and this is what OpenShift virtualization is, and this is an operator, very briefly, just to give you enough context to get you into that operator such that you can go and kind of actually learn about OpenShift virtualization. So you learn things like creating new virtual machines from scratch, creating a template, migrating those virtual machines with the migration toolkit for virtualization, like we talked about, networking components and troubleshooting components, all that stuff you need to know in order to manage a virtualized landscape effectively with OpenShift virtualization. You learn those concepts in that course. And again, you do not have to be somebody that knows OpenShift, that knows containers in order to take it. If you want to then kind of extend your knowledge and learn a little more about OpenShift itself, we've got an OpenShift administration curriculum too. And I would recommend eventually, as you're sort of looking at modernization and maybe as you're dipping your toe more into learning about OpenShift, or if you have to manage OpenShift itself as well as OpenShift virtualization, you probably do need this information. The Red Hat OpenShift Administration 1 operating a production cluster course is kind of like tier one support level knowledge of OpenShift. So it's, hey, this is what OpenShift is. This is the architecture. This is how you get around the console. This is how you interact from the command line with the OC command. This is how you do some troubleshooting, pull some logs. This is how you keep workloads up and running reliably, consistently, and kind of secure. If you want to advance your knowledge a little bit past that, our OpenShift Administration 2 course, Configuring a Production Cluster, or DO280, extends that a little bit. It says, hey, now we're kind of get you out of the day one weeds fighting the daily fires. Let's think 3, 4, 5 days down the line. Let's talk about networking. Let's talk about security. Let's talk about patches and upgrades. Let's talk about managing those in terms of the life cycle of your OpenShift deployment. Let's sort of really think through those things that are more forward-looking as an administrator rather than sort of operating kind of the daily troubleshooting and daily firefighting. So this is if you're leading with virtualization and you really are prioritizing, I need to understand how to migrate my VMs and manage them on OpenShift virtualization and learn about OpenShift later. This is the track to take. If you want to learn about OpenShift itself, first, you can flip it. You certainly can. So everything I just said before applies here too. If you want to learn how to operate within OpenShift, the environment first before you kind of dig into the virtual machines of it all, you can do that too, right? So you can take the OpenShift Administration 1 course first, and then dive into the managing virtual machines with OpenShift virtualization after. And then if you want to extend your knowledge, the configuring a production cluster course as well, which you can also take before the virtual machine course if you so choose. Basically, what I'm saying here is you can take this virtual machine management course in whichever place makes the most sense for you based on your goals for the workloads you want to migrate or the workloads you want to modernize or what you want to manage or how much you intend to be involved with OpenShift as a tool. It's up to you, which is the really cool part about how this course was built, is it's approachable at any point in a learning journey. So that's really the main point I wanted to get across. You can really do either one and have great success. To that end, we have a promotion going on right now through the end of the month. You can get the self-paced edition of our OpenShift virtualization course along with the certification for a low price, 70% off. You can get it at least in the US. So definitely go check that out if you're interested in just learning about OpenShift virtualization and the exam itself. You know, it's a great deal. Our certifications exams, for those that might not have taken them before, are all hands-on keys. They're best in class. They really, once you kind of come out of them with a certification, you know you've learned something, you've learned how to do something. So in this case, you'd really need to understand how to go into an environment, you know, maybe migrate VMs, spin up new VMs, create templates, networking, all that good stuff, and manage OpenShift virtualization within that. Got a question. Normally, Red Hat has a list of objectives for every course. Assume this is the same. Yeah, we do have a list of objectives for every course and every exam, by the way. Those are available. You know, all of this is linked and we'll send these slides out afterwards. So, you know, if you click on the links there, you'll get the full list of objectives, the full outline. Absolutely, this is no different. So we just sort of made it a little more condensed and kind of look at every single item on this slide. But yeah, that is out there as well. So great question for sure. Cool. All right, let's talk about demos. So let's have a look at an exercise from our OpenShift virtualization course. This is perfect. We should still have some time for Q&A after this. So with that being said, I want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen here. I think I am. So if anybody is not seeing the Red Hat Learning subscription screen, let me know. You should be at this point. And I'm going to assume you are unless I hear otherwise. So moving right along. This is our Red Hat Learning subscription, which is our self-paced tool that I mentioned before, where you can come and take any course you would like within our portfolio, self-paced. So feel free to kind of use this as a way to explore that as well. If you have questions about the learning subscription as I'm playing around in here, feel free to ask those too. What I want to do is launch our OpenShift virtualization course. And when you look at the outline, you're going to see a lot of different objectives and different lists, just like we mentioned before. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go through an exercise, create and access virtual machines, right? So I'm going to go to the course. And for every exercise, for every section, you're faced with a video. If you're taking it in the learning subscription, I'm going to collapse that for now. And then this is an exercise. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through some of this exercise at least, and kind of work through it to kind of, work out the objectives here. So the outcomes of this exercise are we'll be creating a virtual machine, access the virtual machine native console with the virtctl command or virt control, access the database with the oc port forward command, and manage the virtual machine from the command line. So the first step is to, as the student user on the workstation machine, use the lab command to start the exercise. For all of our classes, you're going to have a section at the beginning that sort of gives you an outline to the lab environment, gives you the user list, all that good stuff. So we're jumping ahead a bit, but by this point in the class, you will kind of have a good understanding of what this is telling you to do. And our start scripts are just making sure everything's up and running before we get started. So I've already got I'll just go ahead and go to here. This is our lab environment tab. And then what we're going to do is go to the workstation machine and we're going to crack it open. Cool. Great. And then we'll log in as the student user. Cool. And now what you can see is we're in a Linux box, right? We're in a RHEL box, nothing super exciting about it here. I'm going to go to my terminal window, which I've already got open, and I'm going to do that lab start script. And what it's going to do is just check to make sure that everything's up and running, everything's good, everything's installed that needs to be installed. Sometimes these can take a second, especially for the OpenShift virtualization courses, especially if you're kind of diving in the interim here because it needs to install the operator and make sure certain things are running. So in this case, I tried to get this going before the webinar today, but the start script didn't run necessarily, so it's installing the operator for me. So we'll come back here in just a second. And what we're going to do is go to the course itself. While we're waiting on that to load, and we'll look at some of the instructions of what we're going to be doing here. So basically what it's going to walk us through is, as the admin user, we're going to locate and navigate to the web console, right? So it's going to teach you from the command line how to get the URL that's associated with the web console, which we'll be able to do. And then what we're going to do is actually go to that URL, and then we're going to log in. So pretty standard stuff at this point, right? Then what we're going to do is create a VM that contains a pre-configured MariaDB database server. And what's going to do is walk us through those steps. So I mentioned before that OpenShift Virtualization is an operator. If we think way back to that example I mentioned about the smart TV, where you just want to go live in your one little section, this is that one little section, right? You're in OpenShift. It's literally a tile that says virtualization, excuse me. And you can kind of walk through the different pieces, right? An overview, a catalog, virtual machines, templates, that kind of thing. So we'll do that in just a second. Let's check and see if this is going. So it's still installing. So we'll give it a second. And then what you can do is navigate and then go create virtual machine from a template. And you can use a bunch of pre-configured templates that we have within the OpenShift virtualization toolset, right? So in this case, we're going to install a Linux 9 virtual machine. And then you can kind of customize those template parameters, just like you'd think you'd be able to, right? So if you want to adjust the memory or adjust the size or adjust certain pieces and parts about it, you can do that. So we'll do that for sure. And then we'll kind of walk through those different pieces and parts, and then we'll get it up and running. Let's see if we're good to go here. It's still installing. So let's see if we'll get that up and running here in just a second. So we'll do that, and then we'll go to the scripts tab at that point, and then we'll edit the user configurations here. It's going to walk you through editing the password and the user here, which is great. And then we're going to go kind of walk around the virtual machine a little bit. So, we'll check the memory, check different pieces and parts, adjust it. The point of these exercises when you're kind of in the early stages of a class is just to walk you through some different areas that you might interact with of a tool like OpenShift Virtualization to kind of give you the fields and give you ideas. Just got a question, assume custom templates are allowed. Absolutely. There's actually exercises on creating your own templates in this very class. So yes, absolutely, custom templates are allowed and encouraged for sure. Great question. So we're still waiting on this to install. So we'll kind of keep rolling through this exercise here. So then you kind of keep walking through the network interfaces piece, right? Select the disk tab, confirm the attached disks include the cloud init disks and the root disk. It will, that's great. And then you click create virtual machine to spin it up, and then it spins up. And then once it does, you get the console right here. And the cool part is on this tab, you actually see a little image of the console booting up. And you can actually also click over to the console tab right here and have access to the console from within the OpenShift virtualization module, which is really, really cool. You can also access it from the command line with the virt control command, which is really, really cool. So you see, we do that here in just a second. And let's see here. Gosh, it's still installing. This is taking a little bit longer than I anticipated. So I apologize, folks, that we're not in the action yet, but we'll get there. We've still got some time. So you can kind of see what you're doing here. You can sort of understand. You can walk around a little bit. You can log in with what we just created, the user operator one, Red Hat 123, very secure password. It's not, don't use that. And then you can sort of keep working your way through here, retrieving the status of the database server, and then accessing it, with kind of different commands here. So like I mentioned before, it's running in a pod, but it's the Virt launcher here is the database is the pod running. So you've got a pod running with virtual machines running within, right? So we've kind of put virtual machines within the OpenShift structure, but you're not necessarily having to interact with it. We're showing what it looks like here, but we're not necessarily, really diving deep into what it is. We're just logging in. So in this case now we see what port it's on, and we log into the MySQL MySQL command here within that virtual machine, and then we're using it off and running. So let's see here. It's still installing. It's taking a second. So that's I should have installed it before we actually started the session. So that's my fault. Live demos, right? We do it live. It always works great, but it's okay. We'll kind of keep running here. So from there, right, we just kind of keep walking around where you get some of the images information here. And then what we do is we actually finish the exercise. And so in all of our classes, we have start scripts to set everything up to make sure things are running as you would expect it to be. We make sure things are installed in this case, which we are waiting on right now. We make sure certain files might be in place, certain users are created or not created, config files are in the correct place, that kind of thing. And then we have finished scripts to make sure everything is cleaned up after we're done. So in this case, it's going to probably remove that virtual machine that we created and make sure it stops, make sure it's not consuming any resources so we don't deal with any latency sort of moving on. So it does things like that for you. So it's very important to run your start scripts and your finish scripts within our courses as you're sort of working through them here. So we're still installing the operator here. Oh, it's getting there. It's installed, which is great. So it's going to confirm the availability here. This shouldn't take but a second. And we're ready to start. Okay, excellent. So let's do all of those things that I just mentioned, and we'll walk through them. As you have questions, please feel free to put them up in the chat or in the Q&A. Happy to answer those. But since we just had the benefit of walking through what we were going to do, we can just go ahead and do it. So the first thing I want to do is log into the console itself, but we need to find out what the link is. So -u is admin, -p is Red Hat OCP. And I will say, I know it can be very tempting to copy and paste certain things like this, but typing things out is a better way of learning and a better way of retaining. So I do encourage typing things out. Cool, login succeeded. So now let's get the link. So OC who am I -- show console. Cool. And then what we can do is click on this, and it's going to open Firefox for me. Looks like it's opening it up here, which is great. Cool. There it is. Let's zoom in a little bit. And we'll log in with the HT password provider, and it's admin, and it's Red Hat OCP. And we're not going to save that. Awesome. And now what you'll notice here is we're in OpenShift itself, like I mentioned we would be. But if we're in our smart TV right now, the virtualization tile is over here. So this is my DVD player, so to speak. And this is where I'm going to be, right? I'm going to be pretty happy within my virtualization space. So at this point, I've got the virtualization panel. I'm going to go to virtual machines, and that's going to load. And then what we're going to do is make sure we're in the right project, which in this case is creating and accessing virtual machines. Cool. And we're looking at a blank page, which is the correct thing. So now what we want to do is create a virtual machine from the template, right? So we're creating a machine, and we want a RHEL 9 VM, which is right here. I don't even need to search. There it is. You'll notice a variety of different options: Windows VMs, CentOS Streams VMs, RHEL VMs. That's certainly doable, right? So at this point, what we want to do is create this VM. So I want to make sure I've got the right one here. I do. Cool. Awesome. And then what we're going to do is click the Customize Virtual Machine. Awesome. And then we're going to go to disk source, and we're going to use the URL, right? So you've got a variety of different places where you can kind of upload the source here, the source image. In this case, we're using a URL. You can use a persistent volume claim if you like, blank, whatever you'd like to use. So in this case, we're going to do something from within our own lab environment, which is utility.lab.example.com 8080 OpenShift 4 images rel 9 dash Maria. Do not have this part memorized, so I do have it up on my other screen here. db.qcow2. Cool. That looks good. And that's good. Cool. Awesome. And then the optional parameters field. Scroll down here. And we want to change the password to Red Hat 123. Great. So we'll do that just to make our lives easier later. And then we're going to click the customize button. And then we're going to go to the scripts tab, right? And this is all stuff we walked through just a second ago in the exercise. And then we're going to go to the edit icon here. And we're going to change cloud user to operator 1. And right now, just a reminder, we're creating a virtual machine, just like a rel virtual machine here, and we're just editing some of the parameters about that virtual machine. Cool. And the password there is going to be Red Hat 123 because we already set it. Awesome. Go to the overview tab. And we're going to change the CPU and the memory here. And it wants to be 4, I believe. Yep, cool. And we're going to save that. Awesome. And then we're just going to confirm this is here. It is. That's right. Awesome. In the networking section. In the disk section, we're going to confirm a couple of disks are there. They are. Excellent. Good stuff. And then we're going to click Create Virtual Machine. Cool. And now it's going to spin it up, provided I didn't make any typos or make any errors. You're going to notice that it's provisioning here, rel 9 Witty Iguana, which is funny. I forgot to change the name to database VM, so that's my fault. I might have even grabbed the wrong image here, which is also totally fine. So we're going to give this a second and we're going to let it run and just see how it goes. But then what you would do is run through the other items in the exercise that we mentioned to sort of learn about it. But you can also play around in here, right? You're not limited to just using what's in the exercise. Within the learning subscription, treat these like a sandbox. So you can go in here and play around with OpenShift Virt. You can see, hey, how am I running this virtual machine? Can I try to run this image here, right? Like we've got Windows images in here. Feel free to give those a shot. Whatever you'd like to. This is going to take a second to provision. So we'll let that go. And at this point, I think, given that we've got about 5 minutes left, we'll come back here after this gets started. But I do want to make sure I have time to sort of wrap here. So just to give you kind of some final takeaways from this session, everyone's evaluating their virtualized workloads. They're not going away, but they might need to move, depending on your kind of options in terms of your footprint and how you're evaluating it and what you kind of get to. Just OpenShift Virtualization is a safe and stable landing spot for virtual machines that need a new home. If you need somewhere to put them, it's a safe place where you can put them, and we're working with you and we're happy to work with you to find that best possible solution. And then Red Hat training can help bridge that skills gap, right? So if you need to learn more about OpenShift Virtualization after migrating from a different tool or before you migrate from a different tool, Red Hat training is there to help you with our courses. Both in the OpenShift space and in the OpenShift virtualization space. And of course, if you want to learn about other stuff like RHEL or Ansible, we're there for you on that front as well. So at this point, I want to open it up for Q&A. I've been answering questions kind of throughout, so please feel free to keep adding those questions in. I'm more than happy to sort of see those. Let me go back here to see if we're running. Yep, awesome. So now we're running our virtual machine as well, which is great. Let me open up the Q&A panel here. I lost it. Make sure there's no open questions, and there's not. So this is our VM. And I think if I just want to go over to the console here just to kind of play around on my own, look at this. So now if I use operator 1 and Red Hat 123, we're in, right? So if I go, who am I? I'm operator 1, ls-l, right? I'm just in a lovely rel box, right? I can make a directory if I want to, make a directory, fierce webinar, right? It's just a RHEL machine, and I'm doing this from within OpenShift Virtualization. I can connect to it from the command line if I want to. There's a variety of different ways you can sort of mess with these virtual machines and manage them, and you learn a whole lot more about that in the rest of the course. This was just the tiniest snippet of what you can do with OpenShift Virtualization in terms of just making a virtual machine really quickly. But if you want to learn about migration, if you want to learn about creating custom templates, we're there to sort of help you do that as well. So again, please feel free to put any questions you've got in the chat. I want to make sure I leave some time here, and I just got one come through, so I will read those. Great, we've got a few more of these, so I'm going to stop my share here. I'm going to kind of close this out and go back here. Great. Okay, so questions. So please feel free again to keep them coming through. A question coming in: how do we migrate our existing workload from VMware to OpenShift Virtualization? Do we get a dedicated resource assigned from Red Hat to work with us and set up the entire process? It's a great question. And as with anything, it depends, right? So could you go it alone and just, procure OpenShift virtualization and try to do it yourself? Certainly you could, but we'd love to work with you, right? We'd love to work with you. Our Red Hat services team is really primed and ready to go in terms of especially this OpenShift virtualization. If you've got virtual machines or a footprint you want to migrate from VMware or whatever host it might be, we'd love to do a migration assessment, right? A virtualization migration assessment with our services team, our consulting team, to get an understanding of what your footprint is and what your needs are and build out a plan specifically for you, right? So if you need help and you want guidance every step of the way, we're there with Red Hat services, with our colleagues in consulting and of course in training to be those points of contact. So you said one point of contact, a dedicated resource. You could certainly do that if you'd like. You get a whole team out there to help you. You can work through it however you'd like to with a variety of different options from Red Hat services. So get in touch with your Red Hat point of contact and talk about options with our services. Ask about our migration assessment, our virtualization migration assessment, to kind of get the ball rolling and see what's going on and see what we can do there. Another question. Curious about the file systems on that template specifically. Great question. I don't know what's on that template. It seemed pretty blank. I could probably log in as do a sudo command or a sudo command, log in as the root user and see what it is. But it was just a RHEL 9 template. So I imagine you've got kind of your standard file architecture within a RHEL box that you kind of log into for the first time. As a default user, you didn't have anything, but if you want to set it up as a root user, I'm sure you could log in and see all the lovely stuff that you're excited to go see in Etsy or in VAR or wherever you might want to be, in bin, wherever it might be. How does OpenShift handle virtual machine snapshots, backup, and restore to an older state? Great question. All of the above we do handle, and we actually teach in that class. So I didn't cover that as objectives in that course, but if you want to learn about cloning, if you want to learn about snapshots, you want to learn about migration, all of that is in that course. So it handles it probably differently than VMware does, just in full disclosure, because they're two different tools. And so the operations to do them, but it can do all of those things, right? So if you want to revert to a prior stage from a snapshot, you could do that. If you want to clone a previous machine, you can do that as well. So you've got a lot of options there in terms of backup and restore. So it was a really great question. You can learn about that in that class as well. These are really, really great questions. So please do keep them coming. And if you don't have any other questions, I know we're at the top of the hour. So if you're kind of ready to go and you got another commitment, I completely understand. And I want to thank you all very much for taking the time to join us. I'll keep an eye out for questions. But if there's no more, Jody, I'm happy to pass it back to you to sort of close this out. If you've got any final words on behalf of Fierce and sort of our partnership, I'm happy to pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Wes, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to quickly share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. We cannot. It's coming through now.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
So I just wanted to quickly mention again that discount that Wes mentioned during his presentation is offered through Fierce Software. The course Managing Virtual Machines with Red Hat OpenShift Virtualization and the exam are currently being discounted from $3,229 to $999, which is 70% off. So if this is something that you are interested in, please feel free to call or email us. Here is our contact information on this slide. You should expect to receive an email within about 24 hours of the recorded copy of this webinar, as well as our contact information. So please feel free to respond to that email with any specific questions that you may not have asked during this webinar, or it could be about what we do at Fierce Software. And we look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it. Have a great day.